All right, so this is a conversation with Chance Glasco, the co founder of Call of Duty, as well as the brains behind Martial Arts Tycoon, which is a jiu-jitsu game in development right now that I covered a while back. We sat down for a little over an hour. I got to meet his team, and we talked about his vision, pretty much what he's trying to accomplish with this. This game is going to be a first of its kind. I've actually never played a game like this, so I'm very excited to see what this has to offer. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy the conversation and also where this is headed. So grab a popcorn, find something to do. This is pretty much a podcast, so it's a long one, but I think you guys are going to find the conversation very valuable. So enjoy.
Lucas! Lucas, wake up, caralho! It's your tio Renato! I need you to take over the Jiu-Jitsu gym for me. Now quick, first class starts at 9!
All right, well, let's do this then.
Okay, so let's start with the first interesting thing. I mean, not the first interesting thing you told me, but like the first, I say, shocking thing I heard from you is
Yeah.
that you're a co-creator of Call of Duty.
Yeah,
Can
so
you talk about that?
yeah, no problem. I grew up playing video games like a lot of us. Had my Atari 2600 probably when I was like 2 or 3. Played video games until, a lot till through the NES days. You had like the original Nintendo was too poor in between Nintendo and like PlayStation 2 to have consoles. So got back into gaming when I got a computer when I was about 11 or 12 years old. The old 286 computers, super super slow compared to
Mm.
today's. But ended up getting really interested in game development because I started playing these games called Quest for Glory, which a lot of people have probably heard of King's Quest. It's kind of a classic. Quest for Glory was like an RPG style version of King's Quest. I got really into that and realized, like, man, I wish I could make my own video games, but I was, at the time, like 12 years old or something, and there weren't resources like we have, no YouTube. Internet was still in its infancy, and ended up finding out about this school called Full Sail University in Orlando. I decided to study animation there. Um, Went out to California after I graduated and was there for a month. Half the time I was sleeping in the back of my car, like because I didn't have any money,
Wow.
and I was trying to find work. And I was at a 1988 Honda Accord, and so I'd pull up to a Gold's Gym, put windows in the back, or put towels in the back windows, roll them up to block out the street lights, and then in the morning go into Gold's Gym and like shower, so I could
Wow.
try to find a job. Uh, that didn't work out. Like I had a horrible month and ended up driving back to Orlando, but I stopped in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I was from, born originally, and got an internship working at a company called 2015, working on Medal of Honor Allied Assault, which, before Call of Duty, there was Medal of Honor. It was a World War II franchise started by Steven Spielberg and DreamWorks Interactive, and worked on the first PC Medal of Honor game. The reviews were really good. Won a lot of awards. A lot of people know the game from the D-Day beach landing, which is very similar to the Saving Private Ryan, movie. And everything was
Oh.
great, but we didn't actually get along with the guy that owned the company, and so 22 of us left. We formed a new company, originally working with EA, and we kind of headbutt with EA, and so we separated from EA and had to last minute had to. Oh, sorry, that's maybe when your sponsors. I
No,
don't know.
no, it's just I've heard that so many times.
And I'm
Yeah, it's. I
actually
mean, this
not
is.
sponsored by EA. People think I'm
Oh,
sponsored
okay.
by EA. I'm not sponsored by EA.
I just was being careful because I didn't play a lot of UFC. But
Nah, I
this
don't
was
care.
20 something years ago. You know, everyone's
Gotcha.
changed. It's a different um, all different people now. But anyways, so what happened is we ended up leaving, and we basically hook up with another publisher really quickly because people had to get paid, and ended up finding Activision. Activision gave us creative freedom, right? So with EA at the time, they weren't giving us quite the creative freedom we wanted, and Activision was like, "Hey, can you create a franchise to compete with Medal of Honor?" So we were like, "Okay, let's create another World War II game." It was PC only, the first Call of Duty, and yeah, I created the first Call of Duty. And at the time it launched, it was, most games, as you know, like the day one, the sales are off the charts, and there's like a dramatic drop, right? A huge
Right.
spike. With Call of Duty One, it was the opposite. It was like no one had heard of us. They're like, oh, these devs that worked on Medal of Honor, they didn't know how many of us. We were, probably about 75% of the team that left, right? And so then reviews started coming out. This is before people went to the internet for game reviews. You had to still wait a month for PC Gamer to release a review on the game. Reviews came out, sales spiked, multiplayer caught on, and I think the first Call of Duty sold like about 1 million copies, maybe a little under that, which
Wow.
is nothing compared to like what it does these days.
Right.
And so Call of Duty 2, Microsoft asked us to do a launch title, so we did Call of Duty 2 for the Xbox 360. And I think it was something like 70% of people that bought the Xbox 360 within the first year bought Call of Duty 2. So it was hugely successful. And then by then, most of us had worked on World War II games for longer than America was in World War II, which, as you know, is a long time. We don't
Yes.
typically just go there and get out real quick.
Right.
And so we were sick of it. We were like, we have all these ideas for modern day. Imagine a modern day Call of Duty. At the time, like Counter-Strike was pretty much the only big game that was a modern day shooter. And so the two heads of our office, Jason and Vince, went to Activision. They said, hey, modern day Call of Duty. They pull out the charts, the World War II charts, to say, hey, look, World War II has been selling better than ever. No, you can't do, like, no
Right.
one's going to want to play a modern Call of
Right.
Duty. That's what they told us. And we're like, yes, they will.
Just
And so
trust us. We know what we're talking about here.
yeah, it's common in the game industry. It's kind of like creatives butting heads with business, right?
Yeah.
Business looks at charts, creatives look at inspiration. And so you have to find this happy medium if you're a creative with people that are on the business side.
Right.
And so they came back, they told the studio it's not approved. And we're like, what if we just lock our offices and make a prototype for a Call of Duty level, anyways, or for a modern day Call of Duty level? And that's what we did. We locked our offices for 2 months. There's only one person from Activision, I think, that was even allowed in our office for that time period. And we prototyped the level where you're at nighttime in the helicopter with Captain Price. He throws out the cigar. You fast rope down. You kill all the Russians on the boat. I think it was called Cargo Ship. At least the multiplayer map was. And then they came, and first they're like kind of pissed, and they're like, "Holy shit, this is awesome!
Of
Let's do
course.
this, right?"
Of
Yeah, of
course.
course. And then Modern Warfare became their most successful franchise ever. So. And then so I stuck around for Modern Warfare 1, which was my favorite Call of Duty to make. Modern Warfare 2 was my favorite Call of Duty to play, and maybe tied with favorite to make. By Modern Warfare 3, I was getting kind of burned out again,
Right.
and
Right.
we had that big separation where most of the company left, formed Respawn, started Titanfall, and there was a big lawsuit and drama and all that stuff, and I left after Ghosts, so I stayed for about 12 years. And after that, I got burned out, and I kind of, what I say, pulled the Dave Chappelle. I moved not to Africa, but moved to Brazil,
Brazil. Yeah.
which has a lot of African influences.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and just kind of recovered from AAA and got back into Jiu-Jitsu while I was there because I started around Modern Warfare 1.
Okay.
Got my blue belt and just got so wrapped up with work that I would just, barely trained at all for 5 or 6 years. Basically, so little that it was like I wasn't training,
Right.
more or less. And it was in Rio. Lived in Gloria, which is kind of it's more of like it's kind of like more kind of a hipster, kind of more gritty kind of part of Rio, not Copacabana, not Ipanema. A lot of artists, kind of some sketchy areas, but not as sketch as it looks.
Right.
Stayed there for a few years and moved back to the States, had a VR startup, ended up leaving that and following my dreams and decided, hey, let's let's make a game that I want to make, And after spending a lot of time on the mats and playing management games like Sim City or Roller Coaster Tycoon, I was like, why don't we have a game where we manage a actual academy, like an actual martial arts academy, We have games like Lawnmower Simulator, where you're simulating mowing lawns,
Trucking
Pressure Washer
simulator.
Simulator.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like if people can have fun pressure washing in first person, I'm pretty sure we can make a game that's compelling around running a martial arts gym, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how that whole idea got rolling.
So in terms of jujitsu, how did you actually get started in that? Like what's the origins or the origin story for that?
So we had a designer, Jeff Smith. He was a purple belt under Crone Gracie, and then Ryan Lastimosa was a blue belt. Wasn't training at the time, but they invited me to go watch Pride with them, like at Jeff's house, and it was my first time seeing. I'd seen UFC before, but my first time really watching, at least really focusing on Japanese MMA, which is kind of its own beast. It's the walkouts are really interesting. The dancing, it was just fun. It was just so much more fun, and I love the Japanese fans. They were super respectful, and the fact that they respect the grappling too,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that's when I started watching like Shinya Aoki and some of these old school grapplers, a lot of the early Brazilian fighters that were fighting in Japan, and I'm like, man, this is super interesting. This little guy that relatively looks scrawny compared to a lot of these other fighters is just wrapping people up into a pretzel until they quit. And I'm like, I'm not athletic. I'm not very strong. Maybe I should try this. I was kind of a tall, goofy, awkward, lanky kid, growing up, and didn't really have full command of my body very well. Grew up playing baseball. I was average at best at baseball. I played basketball, but I sucked at it because I couldn't rebound, even though I was like 6'2". Fulfilling that white men can't jump, paradigm.
Right.
There's a reason some stereotypes exist.
Well, yeah.
My tiny vertical made up for my height, So it's like I might as well have been like 5'8" and rebounded
funny.
like everyone else.
That's so funny.
But I enjoyed basketball. I just wasn't good at it. And so jiu-jitsu to me seemed like, hey, this is more like a game. This is you can't really compare it to other martial arts that aren't grappling, at least. You can't compare it to baseball, basketball, football. It's its own thing. And so a school had opened in Encino. We were in Sherman Oaks, and in Encino, like a couple kilometers away, Hamil Bahal, which is, a world-known grappler, jiu-jitsu, won a lot of championships, really great guy, and Alberto Crane, who I think was he the first or second American to win Brazilian nationals. I think he went to Brazil, lived there as like a early 20s, I think, or late teens. And so they opened a gym together for a while before they kind of split up and did their own thing. My first experience with jiu-jitsu was going in, and Alberto showed me how to escape mount. He was like, I'm going to sit on your chest. You try to get me off you. I was like, okay. I couldn't,
Of course.
Yeah. And then we reversed roles, and he showed me how to escape mount, right? And I was like, this is really cool. It's very simple. I trapped your arm, I trapped your leg, I pushed my hips up. Here we are, And I imagine someone that doesn't train, you could probably do that to them quite easily, right?
Yes.
And so I started going to that gym, and I didn't realize that I was starting at a gym that was just full of absolute killers. Obviously, Hamilo, absolute beast. I started as a white belt with Edwin Najmi, who is his protege, and then Orlando Sanchez, rest in peace. You've probably seen him in the we were both white belts at the same time. He got into Muay Thai, and he was a bodybuilder, right? And I think sometime along the way of being bodybuilding, he got into a bad cocaine habit, and he used Muay Thai to basically get out of that, and Jiu-Jitsu as well. And so I think Alberto met him when he was kind of starting the recovery mode, and he got into Jiu-Jitsu, and the guy was he was absolute beast, man, over 300 pounds. But just muscle too, It wasn't just like, he had some fat on him too, but he was just like They call him the
Jack.
Cuban tree stump. Yeah, and this dude is the only guy in my whole lifetime that's tapped me to Neon Belly multiple times. He
Damn.
would just get Neon Belly on you and just pressure, and it was like, damn, dude. But anyways, yeah, started with a lot of people as white belts. I became black belts. I'm just a purple. You know, I guess I didn't work as hard as they did, or wasn't a discipline. But I'll get there as an old man, probably. We'll see.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, blue belt. Yeah. The blue belt journey seems to be like the longest for pretty much everybody.
mm,
You get to
yeah,
blue
3 years
belt
for
and then you
me. Yeah.
just yeah, yeah. I'm at
Yeah.
blue right now, and it seems like I'm never going to get beyond that with the way
Yeah,
it's going.
this, I mean, the way I have always approached it is I don't really think about. I don't think I've had a belt promotion that I was actually super excited about because that just creates an opening for me, more people to humble me, right?
Very true.
And so if I'm a white belt, hey, if a white belt taps you, that's they're at
Who
the same
cares?
level as you.
Right.
If a blue, purple, brown, or black, that's expected.
Expected. Yeah.
So now as a purple belt, like okay, so for instance, I took about 6 months off up until yesterday. I've
Okay.
just moved to my wife and I are staying in these mountains, this mountain forest area in the Itaipava region, which is like an hour and a half or like 2 hours from what most people know of Rio, like Copacabana, Ipanema, right? And now that I'm in Airbnb for 3+ weeks, I was like, I got to get back to training. I'm making a
Right.
jiu-jitsu game. Why am I not training? And man, I don't know if you've ever taken time off and then gone back, and you're like,
Oh
why
yeah.
didn't I come back sooner?
Oh yeah.
It's like, why did I wait this long to go
Yep.
back? Um, and so, yeah, it's something that kind of keeps me balanced, helps me. I deal with insomnia, so
Oh, okay.
training at night definitely can help me sleep a little easier.
Right. Right.
It's a good way to balance the game developer lifestyle of being stuck at a desk.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about that. You said when you first started, you went for animation. That was the main thing you studied.
Yep.
What skills did you develop after that allowed you to actually learn how to make video games, especially back then that we don't have like Unreal Engine, Unity that almost does everything for you.
Yeah.
So what other skills did you accumulate at that time that helped you to
Yes.
actually start making games?
So when I started my first internship, I was doing really simple animations. Like if you play the D-Day beach landing in Medal of Honor, there's guys on the ground that are like shaking and convulsing. That was me making a guy
Okay.
shake.
Okay. Okay.
And then after some of that, they threw some guns at me, and I started doing some of the first-person weapons like the M1 Grand, etc. Right? No, I think I did the carbine, the carbine. The M1 Grand was done by another animator. And then by the time we left and went to, oh, by the way, at the time I was using 3D Studio, and then we switched to Maya.
Maya.
Um,
Okay.
and then we all left for Infinity Ward, and then I became like a dedicated first-person weapon animations guy. So I was doing the guns
Okay.
and did, I think about half the guns in the first game, and close to half for most of the games. And as the games kind of progressed and got bigger, I was maybe doing like a third of the guns. It was kind of a
Okay.
small team, and then became the lead animator before I left for the first person weapons animations.
Gotcha.
And so there was, obviously doing the animations. I would go in and tweak a lot of the gun variables. At first I would kind of be the first person to set that up and then let a game designer tweak. Or a game designer would say, set the spread of the bullets, how much a particular gun spreads when you
Okay.
shoot,
Okay.
how much recoil, and then I would go in and kind of do some other things that are more movement related, some of those variables. And one of the more fun things I got to do is, I grew up doing theater and a little bit acting, did some stand up in LA for a while, and so I was very comfortable
Nice.
in front of like the mic, just talking to people. And so they let me go travel and kind of do some of the, when the heads of the studio would go to the event in like London or something or Paris, I'd go to Estonia, or not Estonia, but like, Greece or Italy or some of the, fairly big European countries, but not necessarily the top three. And I would kind of represent the developer side doing interviews with IGN, with all the media
Gotcha.
outlets. And so one of the valuable things that I got to do on at Infinity Ward was kind of learning the PR media side of things. which helps what I do now as co-founder, CEO, creative director. I'm doing a lot of different things. Kind of help there, and so I took those skills onto this new company, Good Dog Studios.
Okay. And the whole time that you were working on Call of Duty, did you always know that at some point you were gonna branch out and make your own, like your own special baby video game, or did this passion develop after Jiu-Jitsu?
I'm sorry, you're saying the first Call of Duty?
No, so while you were still in the Call of Duty space,
Yeah.
like did you know that okay,
Oh,
at some point I'm gonna be done with this team thing. I'm gonna go
yeah.
make my own special game that's gonna be just my baby, or
Yeah,
like
more or less. As game developers, often we have game ideas that we put down in like a Google Doc or something, right?
gotcha.
And there were two major ideas that I would love to do, and one of them was doing a management game based around martial arts or based around jiu-jitsu, right? I also started doing Muay Thai at the same time as jiu-jitsu, but I was actually better at Muay Thai, being I was 6 foot 360 pounds, so
Mm,
I had that length. And so I was better at Muay Thai, but I just enjoyed Jiu-Jitsu more.
gotcha.
It was kind of more of my thing. And so I just kind of focused on doing that. I even spent 6 months in Thailand and maybe about a month training at Tiger Muay Thai. Um, I was actually there when, what's that dude that's always getting in trouble? Like not Warhammer. He's an older fighter.
He's always
Something.
getting in trouble.
He's got grenade tattoos on his fists, I think. Gosh, it's like wars, not Warzone, man, something of
Are you
war.
talking
But
about
anyways,
Warhammer? Sounds like Warhammer.
not Warhammer. Maybe I'll think of him later. But he was there at the time. Brian Ebersol was teaching. He was the guy that famously etched the up arrow in his chest so that you'd punch him in the face. This is
Oh my
like
god, I'm forgetting
like
this. I'm
this
forgetting
is
what
a
you're
long
talking
time
about.
ago. I'm not sure how old you are. You might have been like really young.
I'm 32, so I should.
Okay, yeah, you probably would have been 20 or something. 22. Um, and then yeah, he famously would get himself in a standing um, guillotine just to pull the guy to the ground and pull his head out and be on side control. That was kind of his one of his signature moves. Like he'd just
Yeah.
stick his head into the guillotine standing and then pull, and then he would take it to the ground. And you know how you escape guillotine from
Yeah.
side control? You just pull your
Yes.
head out, and now you've got side control.
Wow.
So Brian Ebersol, very very intelligent wrestler. So like look him up. Shaved an arrow in his chest, pointing up to his face. Funny guy. I was there for 4 weeks, and that was fun, man. Having like these little, 5 foot Thai guys yell at you and call you lady boy because your kicks suck is not. It's very demeaning. Like they're very
They
rough
call
on
you
you.
lady boy?
Yes, you kick like lady boy. I was like, geez, man, take it easy.
Wow.
Yeah, but it
Oh,
makes
I
you
got
work hard, I guess.
man, I got it because I started with Muay Thai as well, and just like
Yeah,
you, when I found Jiu-Jitsu, it's just better. I mean, I'll argue that till I die. I think Jiu-Jitsu is
yeah.
just flat out better. It's more
I mean, to
fun.
me, it's like I could argue that it's better, but to me, I'm like, do both.
Right, right, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
that's perfect because there are many situations where you don't want to end up on the ground, right?
Right, right.
And there is no martial art that's good for fighting multiple people unless
No,
you're like Bruce Lee or Anderson Silva.
right, right.
But if you're going to have to punch two people or take out two people, it's going to help if you know a little striking.
Exactly. True.
And
Very
hopefully you
true.
never get in a street altercation. It's
Yeah.
happened. Uh, we can talk about this later, but it's
You f-
happened before in Brazil
re-
for me. Yeah, yeah,
seriously? Oh man.
yeah, yeah,
Do they
yeah.
call you gringo over there?
Not very often,
Okay.
and it's not. I've been called that. I mean, I speak fairly. I speak enough Portuguese for Brazilians to be like, "Your Portuguese is good." I'm surprised,
Okay.
but as someone that knows how long I've stayed here, I'm like, my Portuguese should be way better.
I see.
And so I can, if I start talking to someone in the first maybe sentence or so, they might think I'm Brazilian, and then they're like, "Oh wait, he's said something really wrong."
Right, 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 right.
Um,
Okay. So let's talk about this game. So you say it's a tycoon game, and I remember talking to you, and I was like, I've never played a video game like that. I've never
yeah,
played a management game like that before. The first time I saw it, like I had no idea the direction you were going with the game. And
Mhm.
then I did that review that I did on it, and the art style, um, the humor with the kid,
Yeah.
that what's his name again?
Lucas and
Lucas. Yeah,
Rafael the Capivara, the
yes.
capybara. Yeah.
Yes. So I want to talk to you about Lucas. Where did the inspiration for Lucas actually come from? Is that you?
No, no, I would
Okay.
say Lucas. There's not a single person. There's when I lived in Brazil the first time around 2017, and I moved to Area Gloria. I was two streets from Morro Santo Amaro, which is a favela, right? And it's an
Okay.
unpacified favela, right? So I was up there a couple months ago, and I have a friend that lives up there. Like, I have a couple best friends that are in Rio, and one works for the government for the city, the other lives in a favela. So it's very drastic, different
Wow.
economic lifestyles and whatnot. And so I was up there a couple months ago, and there's just dudes hanging out with guns, like counting their money and stuff, like
Yeah.
up in the Boteco where they're drinking beer.
Yep.
And so he brought me up there. But if one of the locals brings you up, they're like cool, and
Yeah.
especially if you're up there trying to help the kids, like they're like supportive. Um, and so it's sorry, I feel like I got off from your original question.
No, I was just
Uh,
asking the Lucas character. Like,
oh,
where
Lucas
did the
character, yeah.
inspiration come from? Yeah.
So I think it might have been a little bit of an inspiration from my friend Caio who lives in Morro Santo Amaro, his brother Thiago, um, and just people I met. It wasn't really one person,
Okay.
and I like the name Lucas. It's a fairly common name in Brazil. People
Yes.
can relate with it.
Yes, it is.
As far as Rafael goes, the capybara or the beaver, as you say,
Yeah.
let me educate you on the Brazilian beaver, my friend.
Please.
Okay, a capybara or a capybara in English is
Yeah.
the world's largest rodent, right?
Okay.
And these guys will commonly get to be 60 kilos, 120 pounds or so. And they also happen to be like the most friendly, the most just chill animal on the planet.
Okay.
Like if you look up videos of them, pictures, you'll see monkeys hanging out on them, birds on their head, birds cleaning them, snuggled up against them, even alligators sitting next to them that could be eating them. Just they're like the Xanax of the animal kingdom,
Okay.
but less, well, equally addictive maybe. Um,
I mean, you own
and
one, right?
what's that?
You own one. You have a.
I don't actually own one. Now that would be illegal unless I had like a preserve.
So the photos, because I saw photos of you with one of those,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I went to a preserve in Orlando. I was in
Oh, okay.
Orlando living there,
Ah.
and I'd always wanted to meet one, right? So I went there and I paid $50 to see some reptiles and some snakes and
Okay.
capybaras and some peacocks,
Okay.
like Florida things, right?
Okay.
Um, and yeah, and I just got a photo with one because they're just so freaking cute. And so they're also very famous on the internet. And so that's why I was kind of surprised you didn't know it was a capybara. You thought it was a beaver, but it might as well be a beaver. It lives in the water.
Right.
It's a giant rodent.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, the inspiration for that is like, I don't know, I think capybaras make everything better.
Yeah.
And I think you should add one. Like, imagine a capybara at like a baseball game in the bullpen.
True. Very true.
Why not? Like,
So
how would
that's
that not
pretty much
attract people?
the mascot of your game,
He's our
essentially.
mascot. Like,
Yeah.
if it was like, and our number three wish lister right now is Japan, and they love capybara. So I don't know if it's the jiu-jitsu and martial arts or the capybara that's making Japan wish list our game. Um,
That probably the martial arts.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
but yeah. So and then we have like Chio Hinato, who you don't see, and Tio Hinato, who in the trailer was voiced by Renato Laranja. And
Oh
so the
really?
idea, yeah, yeah. And so the idea is that the capybara is like in a lot of tycoon games, you know what Clippy is from Microsoft Word, the little paper clip that would
Yes.
pop up? Okay, so management games have this, and they're like your advisors. So if you play SimCity, there's an economic advisor, there's an environmentalist advisor. And then environmentalist advisor pops up when you have too much pollution and says, hey, your air is really dirty. You should, enact this policy to clean it up. Or the economic advisor pops up and says, hey, you're almost out of money. You might want to take out a loan.
Okay.
So Rafael is our little advisor that pops up and says, hey, you got to take care of the situation, right?
Okay.
voiced by Renato Laranja.
Nice. People are gonna
And
love that one.
yeah, so and let me see. And yeah, those are kind of our main
Okay.
three characters, and then all the other characters are procedurally generated by code.
Okay.
And in fact, like if you don't mind, like I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't mind bringing on like a dev or two just to kind of pop in as we talk about
Absolutely.
gameplay, give
Absolutely.
these guys some love and attention. Let me
Absolutely.
send out an invite here. If you want, maybe just start with an intro with James, so you can kind of talk about his role and kind of go from there into gameplay if you want.
Yeah, what's up, James? This is
Hey man.
the Martial. I'm kidding. Henry, I was just talking to Chance. If you don't mind, what is your role in the company?
Sure. So I'm the lead designer, the only designer on the game. So my job is to hear Chance's vision and then sort of think about it for a couple days and then put it into something that we can program and put into the game.
Okay.
Um,
So
so
in terms of game development, like what's the process of doing that?
So it depends. In a smaller company, you're benefited a lot from having a designer that's capable of hands-on work, right?
Okay.
Whereas if you look at like a larger company, like I know you do, you cover EA sports games.
Yeah.
Their designers, I mean EA is a little weird, but generally their designers are going to be more like in meetings, like writing on whiteboards and shit, and then sending off requests to engineers. I do a lot more work in engine. I prototype stuff myself.
Okay.
But in general, I am responsible for the question of, or Chance was responsible for the question of what should we do. I'm responsible for like how do we do it,
Okay.
and then our engineer Madison is responsible for doing it.
Okay.
But you do the doing too sometimes. Give yourself
Yeah,
that.
I do a little bit of that too, just to sort of make things move faster, and that's one of the benefits of having or one of the ways you want to build a small team is you want everybody to be capable of actually doing stuff.
Okay. And you guys work together, Call of Duty, or did you guys? Oh, okay.
No, yeah, we met for this project. We have a mutual friend who introduced us,
What's up,
and
Will?
yeah, yeah, Will, awesome guy. And I was looking for a change of pace, and Chance's first game was actually my first like competitive multiplayer game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was in a Medal of Honor clan back in the day,
Gotcha.
so that was fun.
Gotcha. What were you doing before Chance snatched you up?
Sure. So I worked at Hi-Res Studios. I released a couple games with them. I worked on Paladins. I worked on Realm Royale, and I worked on Rogue Company. So I was there for a number of years. Um, I did I did design on all those games. They're all multiplayer, so going to a single player game was a really nice change of pace.
Okay.
Um, and those were all live service games, so we had to, constantly update the game, add new features, fix
Right.
bugs, and while working with feedback from the community.
Gotcha. And do you have any experience with Jiu-Jitsu or?
No, I did. I have martial arts experience, not jujitsu specifically, but I got my black belt at a place that did kind of like I did like kickboxing and Wing Chun Kung Fu.
Okay.
When I was like 18, I hit my black belt, which is much faster than you belt up in jujitsu, but that's just the
Yeah.
nature of different martial arts.
It's more of a
Jujitsu is
JRPG,
very,
system of leveling.
Right.
yeah,
Just at
jujitsu is
level
very,
99.
very like old school and legit with the way that they belt you up. But I
Yeah.
mean, I still, I was pretty good, and I was teaching at that point too.
Okay. How far have you guys actually gotten into this game in terms of like development?
So our most recent build is our Alpha 2 build. An Alpha build is a build that is like playable,
Okay.
but doesn't have all of the features in yet. So one of the challenges of working on a game like this that is sort of a management game is all of the systems have to come together for you to have gameplay, right? Like if you don't have all the different systems, it just feels like a tech demo. Um, Whereas, there's other games, like I've worked on a lot of shooters in the past where, within the first week you can get a gun and a target and you have a shooter game,
Right.
fundamentally. Whereas for us, it took us like a year before we had something you could call gameplay more than a tech demo.
I see.
Um,
And
so yeah, we're at the point where it is playable.
okay,
We still have a couple of features outstanding, and then once we get all of the features in, that's when we would call it a beta. And that would be a closed beta, probably like based on invites and stuff. And that's where, okay, we have all the features that we want for launch. There are still more features we would want to add in the future. And then we need to polish them, refine them, fix bugs, and tune the game so it's good and fun.
okay.
I
But
just
in
put up
terms of,
a screen share of some gameplay if you want to click on that while James is talking and
oh
show you
yeah,
a little bit. This is we haven't actually released a gameplay trailer yet. We're kind of wrapping up some UI and then we can get on that. But in the meantime, I wanted to show something because people get excited about
sir.
gameplay. But yeah, go ahead and continue, James. I just wanted some supplemental content.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. And so, the other thing is because of the way this game comes together, a lot of the stuff right now is, it's in this alpha phase, and it's not really tuned, right? Because it's like, well, I could go in there and I could spend time like tuning the economy, right? And then it's like, but we're gonna add two more features that are gonna change the math that I need to do and stuff. So it's a bit of an interesting process in this genre. It's much more. Sometimes actually shooters in general, you kind of build them piece by piece, right? Like you do one gun, you get one gun, you're like, cool. Now that we figured out our AK-47 equivalent, our legally distinct AK, we can make every other gun based
Right.
on that, right? Whereas this is like, no, I need 10 different features. I have to put them all in. They all have to be working. And then we can start to figure out how the game like comes together.
Gotcha. And see, I was gonna ask while watching this right now, do you only have access to a small area in this world that I'm looking at right now? Or like those skyscrapers that I see all in the back, are we gonna have access to those as well? Can you say
So
right now?
there will be maps that put you all around Rio. Like we want to show all the different areas of Rio because Rio as a city is so interesting in like all of the different like places there are and how much variety there is. There's not really not that many cities in the world that have so much variety within them.
Gotcha.
That said, each map is really locked into a small area.
Okay.
And that's just something that allows us to from a gameplay side, focus the gameplay and make sure that you're playing on something that's focused and good and like intentional and challenging and in like a fun way.
Okay.
And also just so that like there's all these skyscrapers in the background and they aren't as high quality as the ones in the foreground,
Okay.
and that allows us to make the stuff in the foreground look a lot better.
Okay.
Although we are using UE5, which has some awesome new technology called nanite, which is really really cool and does make performance a lot easier.
So you guys are actually using Unreal to build this game right now. That's good.
That's
That's
right.
nice.
Yeah, we're using the Unreal Engine, and one of the luxuries of having a smaller team, and we're not making any engine changes, which means that we can stay up to date with the engine. So as they release new features, they just released 5.4, which we haven't upgraded to yet, but we probably will in a couple weeks. And so we're constantly getting the latest content from Epic Games, and they have just done some like UE5 has some really impressive steps forward in the way that they're actually like fundamentally rendering graphics. It's Nanite basically isn't fully like polygon based anymore, so you don't need to do levels of detail. So in like normal games, if you look in the background, you'll see a guy that's like really low poly, right? Like, or you'll see like I don't know, like grapes hanging from a vine, and if you look at close at them, you're like, damn, that is like a cube, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Yeah, or
Um,
sometimes you'll see in a game, like, have you ever seen like a character in the background or an object just disappear out of thin air?
Yes. Or
yeah,
or
So
just
that,
phase into existence out of nowhere.
yeah, so
yeah,
what that is, it's basically the designer, whoever set the distance for that level of detail to pop in at too close, right? So the
I see.
idea is you should be far enough away that disappearing to nothing is not noticeable, right? And so
right.
you have to go in, you have to change the distance for every level of detail model, so that you don't notice the switch from the 100,000 poly model to the 10,000 to the 1,000 to the 5 poly to the nothing.
Gotcha. But you're
Right.
saying
And
with Unreal Engine, you don't have to deal with that. You can render everything in real time?
Kind of. So the way it worked before is you spend your quote unquote resource cost. I'm sort of being abstract, right? But like everything you do in a video game costs time, and if it costs too much time, then you get low frames per second and it lags and it feels bad, right? So your frame cost used to be like on a per asset basis. So
Okay.
each individual thing you see costs some amount of time to render.
Okay.
They've changed it so now it's, to put it simply, and I do not 100% understand this because I'm not an engineer, but it's on a per material basis, which means it's basically like if you have like 8 buildings that are all sharing the same material, so the same like art sheet, then the game just treats that as one object.
I see.
And so now you can, if you are very smart about how the way you build your background, you can have it much higher detail. And then they also have technology that allows it to basically stay very high poly count, so very, very finely detailed. And the engine just, like, as you move further away, it just renders it differently. Which is, I mean, it's full on wizardry. It's insane. And they one of there have been a lot of limitations that they've been gradually removing. So like obviously in Rio we have all these trees.
Mm.
On 5.0 you couldn't do this with trees, and we're like, damn, that's like half of our backdrop. But they did add it to trees in 5.3, and in 5.5 it'll be on skeletal meshes, which are anything that moves.
Gotcha.
And that's going to be insane because like, there's a lot of people talk about like, oh, like graphics aren't as good as they used to be like 7 years ago, and it depends on game to game. And there's like the Arkham City versus Gotham Knights thing, and like all this, and like it's a really complicated topic. But in a lot of cases, people are limited, developers are limited by like their games have to run, right? On a console. There's different ways to do that. There's tricks, there's art style, whatever. But artists are just getting better year after year, and they're getting higher detailed. And if Unreal Engine's new technology actually works, we can just use models with like 200,000 polygons that are
That
going to
is
be
incredible.
insanely detailed. I mean, they'll be like movie cinematic levels of models. Now, will computers actually run that? Will the
Right.
technology work? Who knows? But like, there's a glimpse of the future, and it looks really incredible.
Now,
Um,
what are you guys using to design these models in
Our
terms
yeah,
of
so
the
artists,
these
character?
are,
Maya, I'd say, I think everyone's using Maya, I believe. Yeah.
yeah, it's Maya, and then Unreal has a metahuman
Oh,
system, which
okay.
is like a character modifier thing. So,
Okay.
like a lot of games that have like a realistic-ish character customizer thing in Unreal, use metahuman to do that, which is it's their system, which is also like really good. And it basically it's we had to be very smart to like make this work efficiently, but we're able to essentially make it so that all these guys are able to run the same animation rig, even though that they can all look different and stuff like that. And there's also much higher levels of detail that we want to put into the characters. The timeline for that is tricky to figure out because there's a lot of stuff we want to do, and you have to pick and choose when to do it. But we have a lot of options for the ways that our characters can look better.
Gotcha. And Chance, I know you mentioned that there was going to be a real life bar that you were going to add to the game. Um,
Oh,
most of
that's just in the environment that you see here. Actually, it's
right. So,
when
but
it zooms out, you can see it on the bottom left. That's where I learned a lot of my Portuguese, my street Portuguese.
okay, so most
Um,
of this environment I'm looking at right now, are these one to one real life, or do you guys take a
no,
lot
not
of artistic
exactly. It's
liberties? Okay,
highly inspired. So this is
okay,
inspired by Gloria, which is where I lived, Rua Benjamin Constante, and then 2 streets from that was Morro Santo Amaro, which was that unpacified favela that I talked about.
okay,
Um, and it kind of took from my life inspirations of actually living there and making friends with people and realizing that the stereotypes that we have of Brazil and favelas due to movies that are all about police, drug traffickers, banditos, uh, weren't there's obviously truth to them, but the vast majority of people are just regular people trying to make a good living,
right.
good solid people, right? And so that's one of the my goals with this project is to actually give, the best representation we've had in a video game of whether it's, people within these communities or Rio de Janeiro or Brazil as a whole. Because when you think about the big movies like Elite Troop, City of God, they're great movies. I'm not knocking them at all, and these films should exist. But if people just know that from Brazil, they think that, oh, Brazil's just a bunch of, it's like a war, a bunch of
Right.
people, drug dealers fighting police, and you can't go there. It's not safe. You'll get kidnapped. All this stuff. And since we're making a game of martial arts, which is a lot about character building, it gives us an example to show like the lives of everyday NPCs, we'll call them, right? And yeah, I mean, James can talk a little bit about kind of the depth of our procedurally created characters.
Yeah, I was gonna ask
If you want.
about that as well. Are you guys basing these on real likenesses, or is it just straight up random?
It's straight up random. Yeah, we have
Okay.
a bunch of different like heads and bodies and skin tones and hair, and we just sort of put them together piece by piece. There is a bit of logic in there to just try and like, I mean, from you can't wear a hat and well, you can wear a hat and a hoodie at the same time in real life, but in a video game that's a little tricky, and they'll clip into each other, so we don't
Okay.
allow people to do that and stuff like that, right? There's different formulas that will make sure that like the clothes don't clash, and there's some stuff we want to do in the future where we could say that like, oh, this NPC is like from the beach area, so they're more likely to be wearing like beach clothes, or this one's from like a business area, so he's more likely to be wearing like, like a suit or whatever. And that's stuff that we all have the potential to add into the system. But in general, the NPCs are just random. And we think that's actually really fun and exciting because each NPC that we create has their own procedurally generated background called their life path. And so the idea is it's like the story of what this person did at all the different points in their life. So as a child, they were a really good student. And then as a teenager, they worked as a server in a restaurant. And then as a young adult, they became a cook. But then they changed their mind and they became a hippie or something, right? And so it just generates random stuff. There is like, if you're a server in a restaurant, you're more likely to become a cook, or if you worked in a library, you're more likely to become a librarian. We sort of did that.
Okay.
But it could just do something random, which is a really fun system because it allows players to look at a character's, like the pieces of character's story and figure out what that story is for themselves. And then those life paths will affect who the character is mechanically as well, right? Like if you have somebody with a lot of like life paths related to like physical labor or whatever, well, they'll be stronger and they'll come into your gym with a higher strength level, which means that if you want them to be a really strong fighter, you don't have to train their strength as much. But it also means that if you didn't want them to be a strength based fighter, well, you're actually kind of out of luck. They've already invested into
Okay.
strength a little bit. So, and then there's a bunch of random traits that can be caused by life paths too. So it's just a high variant system that is meant to make every character feel different and unique and have a story to them. And we think that's important because fundamentally we're in a genre that's about building stuff, and like the sort of the starting point, the locus of the genre, roller coaster tycoon, you're building a whole theme park,
Hmm.
right? Well, gyms are not as big as theme parks.
No.
There's only so much stuff in a gym, so what else can you build in our game? And well, one of the core messages of martial arts is about building characters, building people, making them better. So we wanted to focus on the people and make them an exciting part of what you're trying to build in the game.
Okay. Nice. Now, excuse me. Lucas was he based? I mean, I know his story is not based on anybody specifically, but the look, it was is that based on anybody?
So I would say, our character artist, his name's Diego, and I've known him since he was like 18 or 19. We met my first time in Brazil, and he basically, put together some, I guess, character references of different Brazilians and said, make something, inspired by this, more or
I see.
less. And so yeah, he's made to look like a Brazilian more or less.
Okay.
What's up? We got Nzaba on the call. I just called him in. He's our community manager, sometimes doing some design stuff too. You want to say
Hey,
hello?
hey, thanks for being here, man.
Is your mic working? I don't know if we can hear you. Oh, sort of. Talk again? Can't hear you, I don't think. I thought I heard you for a second.
Yeah, I thought I heard a little bit.
I heard like a little bleep.
You
Well,
see
while he's
some.
figuring that out,
Oh wait,
once
I
we hear
heard
you, we'll
that.
let you know. But go ahead and figure that out. Discord's
How about
always
now?
changing. Like, oh, yes, talk.
Oh,
Yep, we got you.
Hey, we're good.
good. Okay.
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Right. Cool. Hey. What's up, man? My name is Nzaba. Nzaba Mngome Zulu. I come from Swaziland,
Okay.
also in Africa.
Okay, I
You
can tell.
know, yeah, it's not very Western in origin, but yeah, man. It's a pleasure to meet you, man.
You too.
Since finding out about you, I've actually been a fan of your content. Like you make UFC 5 actually appealing to me to wanna play at some point.
Oh wow. So
No,
I take it
serious.
you don't really you don't like the game much. I,
Yeah.
yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah.
EA kind of dropped the ball with UFC 5. A lot of things that we were kind of hoping would be in the game, they really didn't. Um, so it's definitely not their greatest game, that's for sure. We're hoping that they can do a lot better than they did this time.
Then
Yeah.
Zabi, can you talk a little bit at how you ended up in Brazil and how you ended up working with us?
Okay,
Oh, you're in
sure.
Brazil right
So
now. Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
he's
yeah,
he's
I'm
our other half Brazilian. Like us, me and him combined, we're like one full Brazilian.
Yeah, he's
one
he's a
for
real world traveler too.
Yeah.
Now, do you
yeah,
speak Portuguese or?
yeah, I do now, but I came here not knowing any bit of Portuguese at all
Wow.
whatsoever. Yeah, so partly came here because I was looking for like new opportunities. Like I come from Swaziland, right? So it's a third world country and not many opportunities out there.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to study abroad as well in China and learn computer sciences. I just wasn't able to like apply those things in my home country, like salary wise, and just the mentality there is also just not the same. And so coming here as well as getting married, I'm married to a Brazilian woman. This is kind of why I'm here. And since being here, I just like grew to be more independent, grew to be my own person, this person, and began pursuing this aim side of my life more seriously. It was always just like a little thing, but more of wishful dreaming, just
Yeah.
because of like my environmental circumstances. But then being here, it like kind of became more tangible, more possible. And yeah, man, long story short, I met this guy who knew this guy who knew that guy, and in one of the mentors groups that they started here in Brazil for upcoming game developers, game designers, the head knew Chance, and he brought up like when they were looking for like a game designer with somewhat of an experience. And so since that day, I just began following them. But like at that point, I hadn't really communicated with any of them. I was just interested in the game. I was interested in what they were doing, looking at the talent behind, and it just seemed like something special. It's hard to put words into it, and just became supportive of the project. And months later, it got Chance's attention, and eventually, after a number of things, I got to be on the team. And yeah, man, I'm honored to be here.
That's
So
good.
from my perspective, we had this one guy on this server with a name. I was like Nzaba. It's a bunch of consonants, so I wasn't sure what it meant. Little I knew his actual name, or part of his actual name, and he was welcoming every single person into our server like right away. I'm like, this guy's really friendly. And then one day we grew big enough to get our first spam attack, and within 2 minutes, the messages were gone, just deleted. The bot was off our server, and it was him that got rid of him because I gave him some mod rights because he was the most involved person. And I was like, damn, we got to keep like like actually keep a hold of this guy,
Yeah.
keep him involved.
Yeah.
And so we're a small team with not a lot of resources, but I was like, hey, if a little bit of the week, if you can do some community stuff, that would be very helpful. And then found out, oh, you actually, know the Unreal Engine. You've done your own stuff in Unreal, and so I have a feeling in the future he's no longer going to be community manager. He'll probably be a designer or something. But right now, it's amazing to have a community manager that can go into the engine and actually do stuff,
Gotcha.
to bring it to the community, rather than having to take James or Madison off of a task who should be making the game to create some content.
Right.
So he's been a great addition to the team, and yeah, that's pretty much my
What
perspective.
does Nzaba actually mean?
Okay, so just Nzaba means story, but
Okay.
my full name means good news, which is Nzaba Letimnanzi.
Nzaba Letim Nanzi.
Can I just call you
Yeah,
the Gospel?
yeah, you, yeah. If
That
it's
sounds like
easy,
your badass name, your fighter name, the Gospel. Bring you the good
uh,
news.
exactly, by
Yeah,
force.
yeah.
Yeah, and now Henry, is that your only name? Do you have any native names?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. My actual name is Chisom. Chisom is,
Ah,
yeah, Chi is God. Som is following me. So God is with me is what the name
mm,
actually
Yes.
means. Yeah. Yeah. So the way
Yeah,
it was is
distinguished.
it was Chisom Henry Maxwell. And then when I knew we were moving to the US, my parents decided to just switch the names around just so it doesn't get butchered over here. So now it's
yeah.
Henry Chisom Maxwell.
Yeah.
That's
My
yeah.
name my name Chance means that I had hippie parents. I did a lot of drugs, and that's about it. There we go.
Hell, the name James actually means the usurper, which is like really badass.
Usurper. What is that? What does that word
Yeah.
Yeah,
mean?
so that's like
You
you forcibly
overthrow?
take someone's
Oh,
position. Yeah,
Jesus.
like
Wow.
to
Wow.
overthrow someone.
You're gonna be really good at
So,
Manor Lords.
yeah, exactly.
So like you're
Um,
Viking
so
kind of
James,
thing.
I feel like you were kind of in the middle of talking about some design stuff. If you can remember what
Probably.
that is.
Nope,
Uh,
absolutely not.
okay.
It's gone.
Otherwise, I can talk. I've got some more content I want to share. If you guys
Go
want
right
to talk
ahead.
more stuff, okay.
Yeah.
So, let me see here. Let me pull up some more video. So I mentioned, or last year in October, right before Brazil Game Show, I visited. We did a little fundraiser and raised $3,000 and bought. It was like 70 to 80 gis
Mm,
for kids and social projects, right? So obviously, if you're in a high crime area, there's a lot of opportunities to be doing things that maybe you shouldn't.
right.
And jujitsu is a way to keep kids, or even adults, kind of, let's say off
Yeah.
the street. It's still on the streets, but doing good things on the streets. So I'm gonna share a little video of kind of that visit. It's vertical, so sorry, it's gonna not take up your full screen, but feel free to full screen it on your side. And let me hit play. All right, so this is Dona Marta. Many years ago, Michael Jackson visited a favela in Rio, and they built a statue to Michael Jackson, and that's actually this favela. So when we arrived today, I was with a journalist from Gracie Magazine. They didn't even have electricity. They're training in
Damn.
somebody's living room, right, without electricity, with cell phone lights, so that people could see what they're doing. It was super humbling and inspirational, right? And these kids in which is absolutely amazing. What's interesting about Brazil is in the United States, you pay millions and millions of dollars to have property with a view like this. Ironically, in Brazil, the poorest people have the best view. And that's not always the case because there are wealthier people that live in these communities as well. But in general, the favelas, these communities that are on the hills, that are in the mountains, typically are going to be people with less money. And so this was one of the four we visited. Um, we also got a bunch of donations from Shoyo Roll, so thank you Shoyo Roll.
Mm,
Awesome, some very premium gis that a lot of these kids could never afford. Because Shoyo Roll makes really top quality stuff, and also worked with the majority of our gis were from Brazil Combat. Made friends with Fabricio, the owner, and he basically sold us a bunch of gis at cost, so we could buy 70 something of them, and then go around and drop these off. And so it's, if you're gonna visit any of these social projects, bring something. Like, it's really inspirational to go there and see that, but bring something they can use.
Gotcha.
And honestly, these kids were the most respectful kids I've ever met. Sometimes they come in the gym, and like every one of them would greet like me and my wife during one of my visits, and just really, really super nice kids. And here, you're not hearing the audio, but a lot of people assume, oh, these kids they don't play video games, they don't have enough money, but they're like talking about playing Call of Duty, FIFA. They have often like PlayStations from 2 generations ago. Or, but most will probably play something on their phones, but some of them will have like really, really old consoles, that they can play. And I visited Vidigal, which is one of our maps in the game. Also, the first time I had to really use jiu-jitsu on the street.
Oh yeah,
And
talk
then
about that. I want to hear
I
about
should
that.
I should probably just tell the whole story of that day,
Yeah, you
which
should.
is very interesting.
Peace.
It's what I called, it was my GTA in Rio day. I lived in Rio for a total of like 3 years, right? Never had any problems, never was robbed, no violent crime issues, a lot more chill than you expect. But there was this one day that was really interesting, and it was 2 days before the Brazil game show, when I was um, visiting for these social projects. And I'd gone to 3, and the last day there was one in Vidigal, and I had like 10 kimonos left, mostly the showroll ones, and I needed, to visit to get rid of them. I didn't want to bring them back in my suitcase. They were super heavy. And so in the morning, I had a podcast that was actually alongside Ralph Gracie, like the biggest jiu-jitsu podcast in Brazil. And Ralph Gracie was a big Call of Duty fan, and he was like, I want to be on the podcast with this guy so I can, talk to him about Call of Duty. And so I took an Uber from my Airbnb, and was getting on the freeway in Lagoa, which is this big lake that's in Rio, right? And in Brazil, it's common for the military police to just randomly have stops where they just kind of peer into your car and just
Yeah.
check things out. Something that they can't really do except when they set up, say, drunk driving points in the United States, right?
Yeah.
And so the car gets stopped, and I don't put down my window. I guess I was supposed to put my window down, and so the police were already curious. Why isn't your passenger putting their window down? And so he was like, put the window down, and I'm thinking, okay, what's about to happen? What's in my bag? I had a backpack with a T-shirt and also a puppet capybara, a puppet for Rafael, the capybara, right? And inside the capybara's pocket hole for the puppet, right, was my wallet. I just stuck the wallet in there. Good place to hide it. And so they asked me to put the windows down and say, você está traficando armas, você está traficando drogas, which is, are you trafficking guns? And I'm thinking, what's in my backpack, right? And I'd had an experience with Brazilian police before where I was very formal. I did everything how you'd expect you're supposed to deal with police, but I was still stuck there for almost 2 hours, just being harassed. And I was like, I'm going to try a different strategy. I'm just going to try to make these guys laugh.
Okay.
And so I said, no, cara, eu sou traficando uma capivara. Which means I'm trafficking a capybara because I have a capybara in my bag, right? And his eyes get really big. They're like, step out of the car, right?
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, this should be really fun. And so I get out of the car. They're like, get the bag, right? And I take the bag out, and they say, open the bag for me. And I, open it. Or no, the guy starts opening it really, really slow. And he's seen like some kind of fur. He's trying, is this real? Is it really have a capybara in there? He sees a fur, kind of gets startled. He's like, oh, it's not real. And he's like, pega uma capivara. Like, take the capybara. I take the capybara out, and he sees this big lump in the capybara's stomach, and sees in the hole there's like this something black, which was my wallet. This guy's thinking he found like drugs that I was smuggling or something. And he goes and he reaches, he pulls it out. He sees just a wallet. He's like, que porra esse cara? Like, what the F is this, right? And I say, Banditos nunca confere a cura capivara, which bandits or robbers never check the capybara's asshole, right, when they rob you.
Right.
And he just like starts laughing, and the other cops just laughing. He's like, just go. Because I was like, hey, there's when you Rio is not it's not the safest city in Brazil. A lot of people get robbed, and
Yeah.
it's a clear transaction. Like, hey, you give me your money, and I'll let you go. It's not. I don't have the same fear of random violence here as I do in the United States. It's more, with a purpose. Here's a fair exchange. There's not a lot of people that are just going around shooting or stabbing random people for the fun of it, right?
Okay.
And so you give them, and so what you do is you might put some of your money, most of your money, somewhere else, and you have a little bit of money just to hand off. And so I was like, I'll stick it in the capybara. They're not going to check the capybara. And so they laugh, they let me go. I do the podcast, and it's great, hanging out with Half, and eat dinner with him and his wife after. It goes great. And then the last night, I'm like, I want to go to this last favela, Vidigal, which is actually known as like the safest one within Zona Sul, right? Um, I definitely would not mind living there. And so I go there, meet the kids there for 2 hours, meet Igor, who I met off a YouTube video. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the video of this really white Dutch guy goes to Rio de Janeiro, meets this young kid, Igor, who's a brown belt at the time, and was basically a kid that grew up in a jiu-jitsu social project, a Hinzo Gracie project where he was sponsored. And then now he wants to give back. And yeah, actually, I say you asked about Lucas inspirations. This guy was actually a big inspiration for Lucas, because in Lucas, like, you have the ability to give back to your community, right?
Okay.
Or are you about, the fame and the glory, right? And so, watched this video, was super inspired, contacted him on Instagram, and met him and his wife for the first time. And so, like I said, I'm there doing a little hanging out, and then I'm leaving, and then I'm just a half flight down the stairs, and there's this young guy who has this young girl up against the corner in the staircase. And he's like got his face really close, and she's saying assalta, 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 which, as you probably know, means assault in Portuguese. And I'm like, yo, what is happening here? Like, maybe they're brother and sister, and they're just, roughhousing, having fun. And I'm like, I don't think that's the situation. So I asked them, hey, what's happening here? They don't really, they're not very clear about it, but I could look in the girl's eyes and see that she was pretty scared. And so I was like, I'm just going to go downstairs and hide around the corner as if I've left, to pretend that, that I'm not there. So I go down the stairs, I hide around the corner, and, moments after I'm around the corner, it starts picking up again. He starts forcing kisses on her. She starts saying assault again. I go back up and I say in Portuguese 4 times, stop, stop, stop. He doesn't stop. And what do you know? This guy in the middle of the summer in Rio, in Rio de Janeiro, right, is wearing a thick jacket, something you'd see from like North Face or Patagonia. Like, it was just, he was supposed to wear that day because he wouldn't stop, and I didn't want to, make him bleed or hurt him physically. So I just sunk in a cross collar choke standing and just started choking the guy until he left, lost enough consciousness to let go of the girl, not to put him out. I just wanted him to like let go of this girl without anyone getting really hurt, right? And so I sink in the cross collar choke, and he starts getting a little woozy, and his eyes get really big. He's, what the hell is this gringo doing, right? Igor comes down. He hears the commotion. I hand the guy off to Igor, and he's like, get a motor taxi and just get out of here. And so I go down the stairs. I get a motor taxi, which actually the guy that was driving the bike was actually a brown belt with Hinzo Gracie. Or no, brown belt with Half Gracie, which was kind of random. He takes me down to the bottom of the hill. I call an Uber, and I just leave. Ends up like, I think like his father was like one of the owners of the building, and he just thought he could get away with doing whatever, But what was interesting is that, because I trained jiu-jitsu, I was able to passively, fix the situation without anyone getting injured, whether it's risking legal action or just making the person really angry. Because if I would have just knocked him out, he could fall down the stairs and kill himself or something, right? But yeah, that was what I love about that story. Outside of helping someone's obviously really cool, but you hear all this controversy, gi versus no gi, and like, when are you ever going to use gi on the street? They're like, oh, okay, maybe in like, if you're in northern Canada where they wear jackets, right? Maybe in northern Maine where or somewhere where near James lives. But this was in a very hot climate, and someone had a jacket, and I was able to use a gi technique to neutralize the situation. So maybe it'll make itself in the game as an event. But
Hey, that would be good. A personal
It's
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
drank the sweat of men for like 10 years to experience this, right?
Yeah, luckily
um,
I've never had any fights since moving to the US. This was all the fights I had were in Nigeria, just stupid stuff.
how old were you when you migrated?
16.
16, okay.
Yeah.
In Zaba, you were how old?
When I came to
Brazil,
um
yeah.
Brazil, man, I have lost track of like my age. Wait, hold on. It was 2 years ago. So I must have been 24.
24, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So both of you guys came as, not as kids, so I mean,
No.
16 is
basically, yeah.
technically a kid, but you were, mature at 16 by then, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, let me see here. I've also got some more content I can share that might be interesting for your viewers. So before we did motion capture, we did some animation reference.
Let
Let
me
me
play
see
this
if
here.
this is. I mean, tell me if you can see it.
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So here, this is Marco. He is one of the black belts at Gracie Baja North Orlando. He's from Sao Paulo, and he's one of our advisors and helps with, when I show you the motion capture, he's the other person suited up other than me. And yeah, good dude. And we would just make some videos, give them to our animator, so the animator had something to actually work off of. I'll start from the beginning again. So I'm
Is
talking
the
here without audio.
is the animator doing like hand animating it, or is it motion capture?
At the beginning, with Mitch, he did hand, right?
Okay.
And you can see I'm being a fake white belt right there. And so we were just doing some throws so that Mitch, who doesn't train jujitsu, could actually, have something to look at, right?
Okay.
And then what happened as we kind of matured as a company, we switched to motion capture, which I will
Okay.
show that. Oh, here we go. All right. So the difficult thing about doing motion capture with gi jiu-jitsu is that you can't cover those markers, right?
Right.
So you see is Marco there is strapped up and I'm strapped up with a bunch of
we
harnesses, which are
can't. Oh
like,
no, there
Yeah.
it is.
what's that?
We can't
We
see
can't
it.
see it right now.
Oh, okay. Let me, I have to share again.
There we go.
All right. There we go. So you see those markers?
Yeah.
So yeah, you can't cover those up. So I had to kind of make a makeshift situation where I ordered a bunch of like these work harnesses that you might use if you're, working on a 5G tower or something. So that we had something to grab onto without actually obscuring those markers, which are what gives us our data. There's cameras all around us. That's Will. He's our animator, our main animator on the team. He's a blue belt, trains in I think Austin, Texas. Front too. Worked on some really big projects, and I think he might have done a little bit of work for one of the Troy Art Call of Duties at one point. I'm not sure. But our team is made up mostly of, I'd say half or so of the team comes from a AAA background, and they got kind of burned out, like me, wanted to work on kind of a smaller project that was
Gotcha.
you have a little more influence. Also, half of our team is Brazilian, right? If you count Zaba and I as Brazilians, by marriage, then we're actually more Brazilian than American. So,
Yeah.
um, and so
I
you're right there.
dream
You
in
see the bow and arrow. What's that?
I dream in Portuguese now.
Wow.
It's
Yeah, you're definitely Brazilian then.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's that deep now.
I've done that, and then my wife switched to speaking English at home to get better at English, and we haven't switched back, which is probably why my Portuguese is not as good as yours right now. Because I think you speak Portuguese at home.
No, no,
Oh,
actually, it's like the only time I get to speak English, like, in the house. It's just because of like what I get up to during the week, who I meet up with and stuff. That helps me like talk. I have to
yeah,
talk.
yeah. For me,
Yeah.
it's just usually when I go outside, but I should start forcing myself to speak more. Um, but yeah, this was our
Nice.
first motion capture session, and it takes a bit of a process to go from there, clean up the motion capture data, fix all the little details and then get it in game. So it's a lot of people think motion capture just, hey, get in a suit and just bam, it's in the game, it works.
Oh no, no, yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's basically just as much work in the end, maybe a little less, but you're getting ideally more realistic fluid animations.
Gotcha.
Well, and
Animators that are just
jujitsu also makes it more complicated, right? Because like it's you're literally obscuring the markers and stuff no
Yeah.
matter what because you're doing jujitsu with each other.
yeah, you see the cameras on the floor there. Usually you don't have cameras on the floor for most motion capture shoots. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah, so that's a little.
I love your ingenuity with the harnesses to simulate the gi. That's good. That's really good.
A lot of ingenuity in indie gaming because
Yeah, you have to.
not just in situations like this, but just right now James is doing our UI, and usually you'd have a UI engineer for that. Normally, your community manager would not also be a designer.
Does he have full creative freedom for the UI?
So I'm not an artist, so
Okay.
we have a business relationship with
Unleash.
yeah, with Unleash Media, which
Okay.
Chance knows their CEO and stuff. So they are supplying us the art, and then I am implementing it and making it work in game. But I mean, ultimately, I'm the one who has to make it work, so I have a lot of sway in how it comes together.
Okay. So, in terms of when this game's gonna come out, I know you probably don't have an exact release date, but do you guys have like projections?
We have ideal projections, but nothing we can say publicly. Because really, when it
Okay.
comes to making an indie game, it really depends on how quickly funds come in. I mean, if
Okay.
if you're lucky, you're fully funded from the beginning, but most studios have to kind of raise money throughout the process of their development. And
Okay.
so, until we have, I guess, enough in the coffers, we shouldn't confidently,
Exactly.
state when we're coming out. 'Cause that's an easy mistake to make as a game developer. In fact, I need to go back and re-upload our teaser trailer because I believe I put sometime in 2024, and
It's probably
um,
not gonna happen in
yeah, yes,
2024.
yeah. So not to give away too much, but I don't want to. I can't confidently state 2024 right now.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it's done when it's done,
Okay.
which is what Valve famously says, I
Yeah.
think.
But in terms of all the features that you already know will be in the game, all of that stuff is already taken care of. Not that you've already added it to the game, but you pretty much have your direction.
Yeah. We have our direction, we have a solid idea of the features that we want. A lot of it is also, you know, as our game is becoming more playable internally is checking our own assumptions of like, with what we have now, do we need this feature? Is this other feature more important? That sort of thing. So it
Yeah.
does sort of priorities change a little bit as you learn more about your game when you're making it, which is one of the weird challenges of game development is you have to learn your own game as you're making it. But we are approaching a point where we have an idea of all the features we want to make, and then it's just scoping them out and figuring out, like, are some of these like early access, or some of these full release, or some of those maybe like kick to a sequel or something like that.
Okay.
And one of the things that we have been really, really judicious about is building everything and planning everything in the way where it can be extended for the future and improved for the future.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Um, I don't have the only other question I have right now is in terms of releasing content or showing progress. Do you guys have any plans of doing that more?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway, or the biggest thing we need to kind of tackle now is get enough of our UI in where we can talk about
Okay.
gameplay without showing James's old temporary UI, which is very functional,
It's very
but
functional. I'm
doesn't
not an
exactly
artist.
sell a polished video game because it's just functional and that's it. Um, so that's being wrapped up now,
Okay.
and in the near future, I should be able to do some more captures with that and talk
Okay.
about the gameplay. Because right now we've just shown some quick little highlights which we showed earlier that doesn't really talk much about the game, just kind of shows some things in action. And Yeah, and we'd love to come back on in the future if you'd have
Yes,
us and kind of
yes,
give you
yes.
updates. Um, there's still a lot that we can talk about that we won't necessarily spill this meeting.
Okay.
Um, Partly to save stuff for later, partly because it's easy to get excited about all the things you want to put in the game and all the things you plan, but always things that you plan get cut.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it's kind of this nice balance. So you have to make this balance between, hey, get people excited, early enough, but don't say too many things that aren't in the game yet.
yeah.
Because gamers tend to get a little upset when you're like, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. They buy the
And
game and
then
like, well, you
right,
said this back in
yeah,
2017,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and it's not there. So
yeah. We were just in Vancouver talking with EA, and they were echoing a lot of the same things. Like they had some big ideas, and then things just get cut, and it's like so frustrating as a consumer. You
Yeah.
know,
yeah,
it's like you just wish like every single developer just has all the money in the world and all the time in the world and make the video game you guys envision, but like you can't, and it just sucks. So
yeah, I would say, James pointed out the fact that this is probably true that, UFC's animation system is probably the budget for our entire game, right?
At least, if not more. I mean, because let's be honest, like UFC's animation system is crazy, right?
yeah,
Like the characters are doing jujitsu, and like when they slide around on the mats, like that system, dude, I don't know how to make that. I mean,
interesting.
I could start thinking about it, and then all the engineering and stuff. So they put a lot of work into that, and it's really impressive. And on our end, we looked at that and we're like, okay, we don't have the budget to do that. And that's obviously like that's probably, and I don't know enough about the game to say that like it's like the best version of what it is, but in theory that's the ultimate way to depict jujitsu
Yeah,
in a game, right? It's
yeah,
real time. They move around the ring the way that they would. They can do all the moves from all the positions. Like you can look at it from any angle. So we had to figure out, okay, how can we do that? We currently have one programmer.
Yeah,
That
we've
system
only had one
probably had
programmer the whole
five
project. Yeah.
damn.
just for that system, or however many. So we have some plans. We're still in testing phases. We think that we can make a system that is cinematic and exciting and captures the motion of jujitsu in a way that will allow us to move faster and be more efficient with our resources um, without, having to figure out how to reposition characters in real time and all that stuff
Okay,
because that's the tricky part.
okay. So with this tycoon game, because again, I've never played a game like this before. Are we
There
ever
isn't
gonna?
one.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
are we gonna get to a point where we can actually like control the character's actual jujitsu, like what the character is doing in terms of like the moves?
So, yes, but I want to be clear that this isn't going to be like press a button on your controller to do a Kimura, right?
I
It's going to
see.
probably be more like more choice based, right? Of like, okay, you have side control. Do you want to try to take their back? Do you want to try to go for a submission move? Like
Okay,
what do you want to do in this situation?
okay,
And that allows us to, I mean, restrict the options of the player, but hopefully make some good, exciting choices and tough decisions there. And then by doing that, we can lower our scope and we can still deliver a high fidelity and
okay,
engaging version of jujitsu
okay.
that maintains. Because jujitsu is interesting because it's a physical activity, but it's also an intellectual activity,
Oh
right?
yeah,
It's like doing a workout while playing chess at the same
oh yeah,
time.
yep.
And from a gameplay side, we feel like we can at least really capture the intellectual aspects of jujitsu and bring that through in a way that's exciting and compelling. And then the visual side of things in the game will hopefully convey the physicality.
And
Yeah.
just to add something to what James is saying, like I think even this like mechanic and this feature in the game is uh, a bit more involved than other tycoon games that like say for example your roller coaster tycoon or 2 Point Hospital, where you kind of get to have the sensation or the experience of like, participating in a jujitsu match, though it's not exactly the same as you said, button mashing, but there's still kind of like that concept. You still kind of have that kind of experience, which for me is like, really going out of your way to bring that, and that's definitely one of the highlights of the game.
Okay.
I think that will be appreciated by fans.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
if
nice
you
to be
think
able to test your work, and if you put all that effort into training the characters, right, you want to see what they can actually do. Actually, Roller Coaster Tycoon is a great example because I don't believe it was in the first game, but eventually they added the ability to ride your roller coasters in first person, which is
Mm.
kind of what we're going for, but
Okay.
with a little bit more gameplay in there, right? Like let's let you see the results of your hard work in training these people.
Okay.
yeah, my one of my goals for this game is, when someone signs up to start training and they show up to class and you can tell the professor is like really happy this person showed up, right? We kind of want that feeling where it's like an NPC shows up and you're happy they showed up, because every single NPC in the game, um, whether or not they train or not that day depends on their willpower, right?
Okay.
Willpower is one of the attributes within the game. So every character does like more or less a dice roll to see if they roll high enough to even come to the gym. So, you've probably met those characters at the gym that are super athletic. They're strong, they're fast, agility, the whole package, but they don't really show up and train that much, right? They're naturally gifted, but you would actually rather choose like the video game developer Jiu-Jitsu fighter that trains every day, that's maybe not the strongest, maybe not the fastest, over the guy that's naturally gifted but doesn't train,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so a lot of the game is kind of figuring out, okay, what personalities are going to end up being good fighters? Who do I really want training at my gym?
I see.
Um, as James mentioned, you have character traits. So, I'm sure we've all met one of those kind of bully types that come into the gym, right? And they either humble themselves and become nicer people quickly, or they get humbled and they leave.
Yes.
And these bullies might be the really big, stacked, thick dudes that are very strong and just want to just cause havoc. They're not using technique. And so you have to weigh as a professor of the gym. Hey, I've got this fighter that has great potential, but if they're injuring the other people in my gym, do I really want this really good fighter in my gym? Now I've got two people that are out with, elbow and knee injuries, because any NPC that trains with this character has a higher chance of being injured because they have the bully trait,
I
right?
see. Okay.
And so injury plays a big factor within the game. When you're putting together classes, you have to pay attention to how you're constructing your classes. If you have, let's say a class of like 20 minutes of warm up, teaching technique, just, for 30 minutes, drilling for 10 minutes, and 10 minutes of warming down, not a huge chance of being injured. But if you just create a class of just like 9-10 minute blocks of just rolling with no stretching, no nothing, the percentage chance of any NPC getting injured is much higher,
It's
right?
actually 45% in that specific
Yeah, because
example.
you've done it. That's the equivalent of cutting off your roller coaster tracks and just kind of launching them into the Ethereum and just
Yeah.
watching your. Because the thing about Tycoon games is everyone is like, how can I create havoc? What's the most crazy extreme thing I can do? I want to make a class that's just brutal.
Mm.
And so you have to cater towards your fighters. You're going to have beginner white belts that need a fundamental class, that need the fundamentals in there. And then you're going to have higher belts that need to have some kind of teaching that's higher. And if you have nothing but fundamental classes and someone's a purple, brown,
Right.
black belt, they might leave your gym because
Right.
you haven't given them the kind of training that they want, right? We're also simulating temperature, hydration, heat, because all these are factors, especially in places like Brazil,
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
training outside. Um, so as a simulation style game, tycoon simulation game, there's a lot that's being simulated within these NPCs. James, if you want to kind of hit on some of those points.
Yeah, so hydration is example. So hydration is based on, well, I guess I have to start with temperature. So we've taken our temperature. Chance is a fellow of Arshrock, which has like a Atlantic Council climate thing. He could explain that in greater detail, but basically, he is part of this organization that is involved in like improving climate awareness and climate resiliency across the globe. And we used our connections with them to get real world data of average temperatures in Rio year over year, and we've put that data into the game. So each day, each month is going to have simulated temperature based on what it would be in Rio, with some variance from stuff like heat waves or natural, there's some natural wobble in temperature. Sometimes it's a little warmer, sometimes it's a little colder. So we've put that into the game. And then we basically have simplified the way temperature works for your students as to how hot do they feel, right? Are they comfortable? Are they overheated? Are they sweltering? That's dependent on your gym. Is it indoors? Do you have AC? Do you have summer gis? All sorts of factors like that.
Okay.
And based on that, then that affects how often they have to drink water, which could potentially cause
Allows you to
some bad.
give out free drinks from your vending machine,
Sure.
and everyone's snagging $2 drinks, so you're losing money.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of simulated dynamics that kind of play together.
Yeah, so we're trying to have a deep simulation, and a lot of the stuff is we have all that working. So now it's like, okay, now how do we get the gameplay out of it, right? So how do we make that interesting? And just having people have to go to the water cooler if they train for a long time and make that depending on heat. Okay, but now let's make sure that the feedback that you get about, oh, it's too hot, what can you do to solve that, how do you spend money, or do you make money because they're drinking from the water cooler, and all that, like, that's a lot of where we're at right now.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
So you got to keep them happy. And like real life, 97% of people that train martial arts are not training to be fighters. They have
This is true.
other goals.
It's
And
a hobby, self-defense. You just want to get fit. Yeah.
Yeah, so this game is, I guess, as much or more about the 97% as like the 3%, just trying to improve people's lives through jiu-jitsu. And of course, with, Martial Arts Tycoon Brazil in the future, that we have a successful game, we could do Thailand. And of course, that's Muay Thai, right?
Yes.
And then now you have MMA because you got two different martial arts you could potentially have. So
Yeah.
there's definitely long-term potential for other martial arts, different countries, but we have to really nail this one if anyone's going to care about a sequel.
I think you guys are in a really good path. You really, because like I said, the art style alone is just extremely engaging, and it's a first of its kind. It's a very interesting genre, and you're doing a sport that I think will appeal to a wider audience as well, including MMA fans. So, I wish you guys the best. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me on this.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks for having us on, and thanks for that initial video.
You got it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
For this one, I'm just gonna like edit it, and then it'll probably go up in like two or 3 days or so. I'm just gonna leave just let the whole thing run.
Okay, cool,
Yeah,
cool.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Do you mind putting like our like a wish list link in the description? In
anything
Discord?
you need me
Awesome.
to put in
Appreciate
there.
it.
Yeah.
Guys, right now the biggest the most important thing for us as far as leading up to sales would be people joining our Discord and people wishlisting the game on Steam. And if people do those two things, that is incredibly helpful for us.
You got it. Yeah, we'll do that.
And we definitely need the help of the community because we're not exactly some huge AAA company with 50 million of funding. So.
Right.
I wish.
Right.
Actually, I don't. There's a lot of It's kind of nice being a small company, but it's got its struggles too.
Yeah. So James.
Yep.
Oh man. Nzabi?
I think close. Nzaba.
Nzaba. Okay. Nzaba.
Yeah.
Very close. I won't forget that. Nzaba. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks
Great meeting
again.
you.
And let's try to do this again sometime.
Awesome. Thanks. See you soon.
All right.
Definitely.
Have a
See you,
good
man.
one. All right.
Ciao.
Peace.
Ciao.